Benjamin Franklin said, "In this world nothing can be said to be certain, except death and taxes."
Hello and welcome to the show, Colourful Conversations with Clergyman Pete and Businessman Mark. This week we debate tax avoidance and the Paradise Papers. Well, quite remarkably, we have seen that the Paradise Papers have given revelations about many well-known individuals who have, strangely enough, avoided tax. Yes, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of tax shifted overseas just simply to pay the taxman. But it's not just simply the fact that they are actually avoiding tax. It's the fact that people are no longer actually gaining from the tax. Typically, tax is paid to help the people we all know and love, you and me and everyone else. Well, Clergyman Pete, I noticed, sieving through the Paradise Papers, that you're not on it. Why is that? And where have you put your money?
Wouldn't you like to know? Yes, that's the thing. The thing about the tax man, I find, is that it's best just to cough up straight away. I mean, my experience in paying tax is that despite the fact that I fill in a form every year detailing my income, etc., I always get paid money back by the taxman each year.
Oh.
So, and it feels great, except for one thing, which we'll come back to later, one fact that it's often forgotten in the payment of taxes is that it's my money. Well, not all of it. I mean, the money I pay in tax is my money. The government's just taking it off me. So, when it comes back to me, it was my money in the first place. But it feels good, nevertheless, to get some money back.
Well, that might feel good, but it does make me feel a little bit uneasy. The fact that some very well-known people have, unfortunately, shifted money overseas to avoid tax. Strangely enough, I do believe that the Queen, Prince Charles, Lewis Hamilton, your great hero, in fact, many politicians, it's been even alleged that Lord Ashcroft, yes, another one of your great hero.
Yes, Tory party donor, yeah, of course.
Tory party donor,
great man.
Absolutely, who allegedly has avoided tax. Now, of course, we can mention many other names, and I'm sure we'll get to them at the end, but it seems quite extraordinary that a large number of people, in fact, hundreds, if not thousands of people who are very wealthy have actually taken the decision to avoid tax. Now, these primarily are wealthy people. We're not citing people who are ordinary workers who pay quite honourably their taxes year in, year out. You mentioned yourself, good sir.
Indeed.
Filling out your tax, your papers each year and have a very good relationship, particularly with Her Majesty's Revenue Service.
Yes.
Now, the
best possible.
Absolutely. Now, I want to get to why is it that these people seem to think that it's a good initiative here, that whilst in some cases their defence is it's not against the law, that they've employed people to find loopholes. And essentially, one might argue, say, it's an immoral act.
Yes.
And that they go about their ways, as they often do, trying to siphon off and look far and wide across the oceans to see these tax havens.
Yes.
Now, to me, that in itself is quite distasteful. So I just sort of thought to myself here, well, this does make me think of a sort of a pirate community going on here. And I thought, well, look, here's a little thought called Landed in the Docks. Ahoy, I am the Jolly Roger, having floated money overseas. A real life tax dodger, avoiding lots of hefty fees. Though I soon become a lifelong lodger, as one of Her Majesty's prison detainees. Now I am an old codger, and they've thrown away the keys.
Yes.
So yes. How many pirates have we got to try and?
Well, I mean, I want to
prison here because there seems to be an awful lot of them.
Yes. Now let me put the moral or rather immoral argument about it. There. Let's tease this out because that's the basic premise of this episode of Mark and Beat is that there's a moral issue, but we're not sure what it is. We're trying to get to the bottom of whether this tax avoidance is actually immoral. Here's an argument for it being immoral, in that what you're seeing is similar to. So I'm going to give an analogy. It's similar to a company being too big to fail. Similar to the idea of you having if you have an overdraft with the bank, then they own you until you pay it back. But if you have a huge overdraft with the bank, then you own them. If it's £100, they own you. If it's several billion pounds, you own them. And in the same way, if you've got a big company that wants to avoid paying tax, they can be just simply because they're so big. And so
yes.
the immorality of it comes with saying that there's a different treatment. There seems to be two laws. Now, it's not against the law, but because these large firms who have access to great lawyers and can put systems in place to have their funds transferred overseas, etc., because they're in that position, effectively there are two laws. And so, therefore, it's immoral because you're having it implemented unfairly. That's I would say, is the main argument for saying this is immoral. And not just distasteful, but actually immoral, that it's wrong.
Well, right. And then, in fact, we've seen this recently, last year and this year, where big corporate companies, as you say, employed lawyers and many, many administrators to actually identify places, strategic places in the world where they can pay the minimum corporate tax. Now, the Paradise Papers are very different because it reveals individuals who have tried to avoid tax. So we've got, as you say, two levels. We've got corporate companies trying to do it, and we've got individuals trying to do it. Now, I guess the question then here is the law just an ass? You sort of indicated this at the beginning of the show here, but there's one thing that we can be certain of is sort of death and taxes. But the thing is, I will say what I find quite remarkable is how many loopholes seem to be in law. And we keep seeing, year on year, more and more of these examples. The Paradise Papers are just one of probably many that I think are going to come up. Now, what we see here in the Paradise Papers is that it just happens that in this particular case, companies are actually siphoning off millions of pounds and dollars to places like Mauritius and the Cayman Islands and many other places like that. Should there now be a case where, as we've seen in many other types of subjects, whether it's about the environment and they all come together to try and unify to one common goal, to avoid really what is an immoral issue? Should the countries and companies come together and say, look, enough is enough. We now need some kind of global standard. Is that asking too much? Is that going to be impractical? We've seen it with other things where people have tried to do it and sign up to these sort of legislations to avoid individuals just simply and immorally. I think we're taking that standpoint here, I think, to really pay your due. I mean, look, people will still, if they are Formula One drivers or if they're actors, and in some cases big businessmen, they're going to be millionaires anyway. Why is it that we should now start to say, well, look, let them carry on, let them exploit these loopholes? Maybe the act of finding a loophole is something now that we should try and pursue these individuals more and more. Clearly the journalists do, and they keep raising this, and yet nothing seems to be done.
Yes,
what can be done?
Well, I mean, what can be done theoretically is not the same as what can be done and achieved politically speaking. I mean,
yes.
The one thing that should be done and could be done is simplifying the tax code. You could just make it very, very simple. Have one rate of tax, or at least just a few rates of tax. Don't have all these little exceptions and exemptions that you can use, because then you can find the loopholes if you've got a good enough tax expert. Now, the other thing that could be done is along the lines you just suggested, Mark, is that if you got governments of countries across the world to agree, then you could close down these tax havens. And I think that governments would be in favour of it.
Yeah.
Maybe not the governments of the tiny tax havers, but in general, they'd be in favour of it. But the companies at the moment, these huge corporations, are at least as powerful as governments. And so they tend to have a big say. Why do they have a big say? Because of money. Money talks. People can be swayed into political decisions by money, not necessarily in a clear immoral way. It could be, you take a backhander, but it could be that money is put into a project that you want to occur, that's doing good. It's not necessarily that you've got an out-and-out corrupt politician, but you're swayed by the fact that by the fact that people who are lobbying you have money and influence in business, in different things that they can achieve that you want to achieve as a politician, or maybe they simply can give you some money. So that will make it difficult to implement any sort of sweeping reform.
Well, can I just raise a point on that, because this is a really good one, because to that very point about being an investment advisor, maybe this is where the key is. It's not necessarily about the individuals, because the individuals may or may not choose to do that. But if you could clamp down on those administrators, here's an example. The tax avoidance schemes to do with the Paradise Papers were administered by Appleby. They're a law firm at the centre of these particular leaks. Now, in a statement that was made by Appleby, it said it was a law firm which operates in jurisdictions regulated to the highest international standards and advises clients on legitimate and lawful ways to conduct their business. Now, yes, thank you for that rather generic statement. But the fact of the matter is, what they are doing by their actions is trying to act on behalf of very wealthy individuals to avoid paying tax. That's their sole purpose. That's the foundation, the immoral foundation. And I would have thought that there needed to be much more scrutiny on the way that these organizations and individuals actually function. Because if we could stop those type of organizations, then it means that we can quite fairly pursue them to ensure that when they're acting on behalf and guiding their clients, that they are paying their fair amount of tax. Now, I think that one of the issues that will always be, and some people's defense will be, that if, say, for example, you're a wealthy entrepreneur, an actor, and so on, is that the likelihood is you will always be in a situation where one country has a different level of tax than another. That's inevitable. If we take the tax structure in Sweden and compare it to Germany, to compare it with the UK, to compare it with the Republic of Ireland and America and so on, there are always going to be differences. But what I would say is that it has to be surely about the point of place of residence and at the source, where they are being taxed at source. And I think that that's what needs to happen as well, because typically a lot of these people will avoid going into a given country for a given period of time. Same again in the United Kingdom. If you spend a certain period of time out within any given tax year, you will not pay tax. So it doesn't matter what you earn, you could bring that money back in. Even though you may have a house, you may own land, but even if you are a holder of a British passport, and maybe that in itself is a clue where you are registered. If you are a citizen of a given country and you honour and value that, surely that should be where it should actually be taxed. Yes. Maybe that's where we should start to sort of think a little bit about being fairer with the way that your money is being taxed.
No, that does make sense. And one other thing that I think makes sense, and this is an opinion that I've shared with this a lot, so I'm going to say it again, though. We pay too much tax. I mean, if you...
In the United Kingdom.
Yeah, in the United Kingdom. And in the United States, they certainly pay too much tax. Their corporation tax is some huge amount, isn't it?
And more in Sweden.
And more in Sweden, yeah. I believe so. They're paying in the US. Is it 35%? It's a large amount anyway. Now, listeners, you can correct me if I'm wrong there. But my point is not the exact figure, but that it should be less. we should be paying the minimum amount of tax. We should be paying tax to the government for them to do the limited things that I think government are meant to do. They do too much. Yeah, regulation. They should be involved in regulation for safety in businesses and that sort of thing. They should be involved in the defence of the realm. They should be involved. They should probably be involved in policing, although that's not always the case. The national government is involved. Certainly, in Britain, that isn't the case. It's the local governments, or they're local, aren't they? Police forces, but also you shouldn't have the government involved in education and health service, because they are run extremely badly. I mean, when you see how terribly the government runs such thing, then you realise that you're wasting a lot of money. It's not just that you don't want them to do that, so it's wasted tax. It's tax paid on something extremely inefficient. So that's
exactly.
And if
Where
you
is the money really going? Yeah.
And if you reduce the taxation level significantly, you wouldn't have big companies and very wealthy individuals searching around desperately to save money, because it wouldn't be that they wouldn't be paying that much. It wouldn't be worth their while, and you would always get some people doing it. But I think you'd significantly reduce it if there weren't that much tax payable, and then you'd get wealthy people and big businesses moving to Britain or wherever you are. Our listeners are dotted around the world, so wherever you're based, lobby, use whatever influence you have. This is what I say, to reduce tax. I don't think there's ever a time when you shouldn't lobby to try and reduce tax, at least by even if the government's spending on all the right things, it can become more efficient. So reduce taxes, I think, is a major thing that could be done. It could be implemented very quickly.
Well, I think that's certainly maybe a point as an incentive, and I do agree that government role. I mean, from a big mantra from the Mark and Pete show, which is that again, if perhaps taxes were more locally received, and I know there's an element of that certainly in the United Kingdom, which tends to be called the council tax. This is where you pay a fee. Essentially, it's used for infrastructure, lighting and streets, etc., and the maintenance of those highways. But the fact is that maybe being a little bit more local with the way that revenue is brought. And I come back to the point of residence, that again, on different levels, what passport do you hold? Where do you live? What do you do? Now, I understand that there'll be some people absolutely screaming right now to say, hold on, I don't necessarily work in one country. I may be earning revenues from different sources. Yes, absolutely. And I agree. And this is where I think that then a little bit more, quite remarkably, that in a world which is much more global now in the way that we trade, etc., ironically, that we've opened up the doors to some very good international trade, but we haven't thought very carefully about the way that we tax people and companies. And if we carry on the way we're going, sorry to have to say, folks, but the things such as the Paradise Papers will just be burnt, forgotten, and another set of reports will come up where more celebrities, yes, more politicians, more businesses, etc., will continue to do what they're doing. And it will just carry on.
Yes,
so until an act is taken where you can think, okay, if we're going to open up trade, be more global, then you've got to look at those other mechanisms. Strangely enough, and I'm not for red tape by any means, but oddly enough, we don't seem to have any tape there. It seems to be,
well, yes,
missing completely.
This is a place where we would like a bit of regulation, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And it seems that the EU and the UK governments have both been at fault here for not clamping down on these things. So it's not one specific regulatory body that ought to step in. It's just that it should be done. And so,
Indeed.
What you end up with, just in closing, I'll just say that with this being the case and government not planning to spend less on all the many myriad projects that they run, because these companies and individuals pay less tax than they should, we pay more.
Oh, yes. ultimately somebody pays.
Yeah.
But sadly, not necessarily those millions that are appearing on the Paradise Papers. So, listeners, what do you think? I mean, do you have an issue with this? I mean, are you happy with the way that things are? Are you happy for multimillionaires to carry on siphoning away their millions to avoid tax? Or maybe, perhaps, we should rethink this. Why not let us know? Try and log on to www.markandpete.com and let us know your thoughts. Follow us at Mark and Pete on Twitter, and we'd love to hear from you. So thanks for listening, and join us again next time for more colourful conversations with Mark and Pete.